This is one of my favorite quotes from Brene Brown. As our fear, uncertainty, and feelings of vulnerability increase, cruelty becomes an acceptable way for us to discharge our pain and discomfort rather than doing the difficult work of embracing our own vulnerabilities and imperfections. We expose, attack, or ridicule what is vulnerable and imperfect about others. And she's saying this in this particular book about adults. But it's equally true for kids. That's where we learn it in the first place. So, where are ways in our broader culture that we're doing this as adults? Or not even necessarily in our broader culture, but in our adult lives, where are ways that we see this happen and experience this as adults?
We skip along, I would think, when it comes to racism.
Racial, yes.
Racial discrimination. Obviously, we feel vulnerable, trying to find that scapegoat. We feel better about ourselves.
And there's very much an otherness that is a distinction, anytime we're talking about sexism or racism or religious differences, or anytime there's an other that might make me feel vulnerable in some way.
Weight.
I'm sorry?
Weight. You see it across the board. Unfortunately, in adulthood, people are so preoccupied with their weight, physicality, and we're so quick, as it's seen and evidenced by magazines. Oh my gosh, I can't believe she's gained so much, or she's lost so much after this pregnancy, and we're just so preoccupied with it. And
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect example of our projecting our own insecurities on others.
Yeah, and that gets internalized so much by us as adults, but also for our kids. My daughter was 6 the first time she comes up and says, "Am I fat?" I'm like, "No, you're this big, first of all, and you're like skin and bones like your dad, lucky kid." But yeah, the fact that she's asking me that at age 6, like, who have you heard talking about being fat? And like really trying to, part of me wants to go, "Don't ever say that again." But I don't want to shut that off either if that's what she's feeling. So what else? There's all sorts of body shaming and weight preoccupation, in the adult world. Yeah.
It's like snap judgments. I caught myself making one the other day because this lady pushing a grocery cart. I was like, oh my gosh, she totally stole that shopping cart. It's kind of a pet peeve to me, and it doesn't even fit. And then I was with my husband, and I was like, oh my gosh, and I just judged that lady instead of like saying, oh, maybe I should be offering her a ride. She's kind of older. I was just like, I'm such a horrible person. Except that wasn't the words that I used. So I do think just on a day-to-day basis, we make so many snap judgments and we don't even know what's going on. We don't know anybody's story.
Don't you think so much of that is just a side effect of an urban setting? I grew up in a really small town, great place to be from. And one of the things that I know from that experience compared to being in a city, where if I'm walking down the sidewalk pushing a grocery cart in that small town, I'm going to have like 10 people stop and say, that know me by name and say, hop in, I'll give you a ride, because there's a different kind of community feel to that. When you know someone and there's some sense of identity and connection to that person, then it's a very different kind of interaction versus in the city where our first thought when you see somebody stranded on the side of the road with a flat tire is, I can't stop, they might be an axe murderer. There's a very different kind of fear that is present, when it's somebody that you don't know. What else? Passive-aggressive behavior.
It's not outright.
For example,
Where someone
office politics of who signs the birthday card or.
There are some classrooms where an invitation's not allowed to go around unless it's given to everybody. So
Yes.
it's either everybody gets it or nobody gets it.
Yes, which makes parents that don't want to invite 20 kids to the birthday party hide it under. Okay, so when the teacher's not looking, give this to your friends. Yeah, and it's not like the other kids that aren't invited don't know that there's a birthday party going on because they hear the other kids talking about it. Yeah. So what about in relationships? Couple romantic relationships. What are ways that this might look?
In the most extreme, like domestic violence or just like infidelity, you might see where there's a lot of projection going on. So there's that fear and vulnerability, but so the person will mistreat the person or their relationship to make themselves feel better. So that's an extreme. Of course.
How many of you are familiar with the Gottman's 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse for marriage, relationships, and predictors of divorce? So what are they? Stonewalling, contempt, criticism, defensiveness. Yes. So when we talk about criticism and defensiveness, especially early in the kind of evolution of disconnection in a relationship, it very much ties into this concept that the more I'm feeling criticized, which the distinction that Gottman makes between criticism and a complaint is that criticism is something that's about me and my character. You're lazy, you're, trying to think of all the different, you're incapable of doing whatever, to meet my needs, or there's those kinds of messages that anytime we feel that kind of criticism, we push back against with defensiveness, or it's really easy to push back with defensiveness. And if that kind of thing is happening in the presence of kids, what are they learning? They're learning attack, defend, deny, in contrast to a different kind of pattern of interaction that would be one that's more around connection. And the way Gottman talks about doing that differently to break out of that defensiveness, criticism circle is that we learn to name our needs versus naming a criticism. But when you talk about naming a need, how much vulnerability is tied to being able to say, I really need to feel important to you, instead of, I can't believe you're going with your friends to play poker tonight and not spending the time with me. It doesn't require any, near as much vulnerability to express anger as it does to express a need like that. And how often do we really give our kids permission to express a need, an emotional need to us? Mom, I really need, even if they have the language to do it, Mom, I really need to feel like I'm more important to you than your job. So when you didn't show up for my class program, that really, really hurt my feelings. That's not what kids say, right? They say, oh, I'm so mad at you. I can't believe you did that, kind of, if they say anything. So what else? Where else does this? The example that I'm particularly thinking about is if you turn on the news, how much does this happen that we don't really even hear anymore? Especially gearing into another election cycle that I'm really not excited about listening to the news again. I really think I'm just going to turn off my TV and everything for the next, 18 months or whatever. I'm so done with that. I know who I'm voting for already, so I don't want to hear it. But how often is that what kids are exposed to, whether it be the conversations that they hear their parents having with somebody else around politics, around PTA, around church organizations, around, the list goes on, in ways that we unintentionally, unknowingly model this very kind of culture and behavior for our kids. And then are surprised when they do the same thing with their friends, right?
Well, I think we see a lot of this on social media for kids and adults. We haven't even gotten to social media. Yeah. But I mean, it's pervasive. When they get home from school, the proposals, the constant barrage on Twitter, or I'm not going to like this person's picture because if I like it, then and it's just.
Yeah. And when you take this kind of dynamic and put it into that social media, that's hard for adults to navigate in so many ways because, I know for myself, when I post certain things on Facebook or wherever, Facebook's one I'm on the most probably, but there is this draw of how many people liked my status. I'm like, how silly is that? I'm actually wondering about that. Or why didn't so-and-so, they must not have seen it yet. Or, there's that internal dialogue that you can sometimes have with that, because there is a vulnerability of putting yourself out there and having somebody not like it. And,
I noticed too, my husband and I, we've been more observant of our parenting. A giant magnifying glass, and even professionally work with kids, and I think my natural tendency is to be very hard on boys, and just come on, suck it up. Whereas girls, I'm like, oh yes, okay, yes, I understand. I'm way more empathetic, and it's a real shortcoming in life. I'm trying to work on it, but I see this, and I feel like. You don't really care too much about the girls being boys, but
There's a
in
different
my
kind
experience, the girls are way more boys than boys.
It's a different kind of, and again, drawing that distinction between what's truly bullying versus meanness and social status, posturing kinds of stuff. And I think we could have all sorts of discussion and debate about whether it would be accurate to say that the kids that end up on the bottom rungs of the social status are bullied. I wouldn't be surprised if they describe themselves as being bullied and resulting in them being at the bottom of that status. But one of the things that I talk to parents a lot about is how do you protect your child from being the target by how they're dressing, how they're, what's their hair look like, and really trying to be careful about walking that line of not feeding into that as important, but also recognizing that that's how kids get targeted sometimes. If they, there's a fine line between being individual and being different, and different is often what gets targeted because it does really hit that vulnerability piece for so many kids of, if you're different from me and that's okay, then does that mean that there's something wrong in me? And so the more we can have a family culture and a school culture that makes both okay, the less significant that is.